Good morning, afternoon, or evening, folks, and welcome to Cast of All Trades. I'm your host, Orion Siebert, and in this episode, I interview my friend Gabe. We've been playing tabletop RPGs like Dungeons & Dragons for years, and he has been the primary dungeon master for our group. In this episode, we talk about storytelling, world building, improvising, how D&D has helped him outside of Fantasyland, and much more. Gabe, it's awesome to be with you again on a podcast. It's been way too long, and figured since I'm launching this new show, you would be a great person to come to for this first launch week of episodes. So
Yeah.
thanks for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a delight to be part of one of your excellent projects.
Wonderful. So, like I said before, this episode I want to talk to you about D&D, in particular the storytelling, world building, and improvising aspects of it. So before we really dive into it, I wanted to ask, how long have you been playing D&D? Sort of walk me through that journey of what got you in.
So, gosh, it probably was sophomore year of high school, I want to say. So, would have been 2016, 2017-ish.
That's about right, yeah.
Yeah, and I I had kind of I'd stumbled across some like podcasts. Like I feel like a lot of people like finding Critical Role and stuff, and kind of like started listening to that a little bit, and kind of like, what is this? What is this? And talked to some people at school, and I found that one of my friends at school had a copy of the Player's Handbook, and I asked him if I could borrow the Player's Handbook, and basically we were going on a school trip or whatever, and basically the entire like hour ride there and back, I just read the Player's Handbook cover to cover, and I was just hooked. But yeah, we I kind of started playing with some friends at school. It was definitely like very very loosey goosey, as you say. Like it's just kind of doing whatever, more or less, just hanging out at
Beer
at
and
a
pretzels, make it up as you go.
yeah, yeah. No beer though.
Well, yeah.
We were underage.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Beer and pretzels.
Yes, beer and pretzels, and yeah, we started playing that way. Then I don't know, somewhere along the line, I started my first like proper D&D campaign, where I bought like the Waterdeep Dragon Heist, which was like the new hot off the shelf book at the time, and got some people together, which included you. I'm sure you remember.
Yep.
And yeah, we got some people together and played probably that. Maybe it wasn't that campaign exactly, but played with that group for almost 2-3 years or so until
we started that group, I want to say, like late junior year, if not early senior year of high school.
yeah, and so that probably lasted about up until the end of high school, so 2 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I don't know, just been playing ever since. Uh, it waxes and wanes for me. People, kind of with like how your social group, this people get busy and stuff. So sometimes I'm playing a lot more D&D, a lot more consistently, and sometimes I'm not. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Scheduling, truly the great enemy of all D&D campaigns.
yeah, it's more D&D campaigns have been killed by scheduling than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Of course.
that's like the coolest take ever.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And before we dive into it, one more question of why become the dungeon master? It's not the role that basically it's the role that almost no one in the D&D group wants to do.
Oh, because nobody else
Why'd you
will
step into that?
nobody at first, because nobody else will do it. Like
Mm-hmm.
truly, like I think my first experience DMing was like with my first group when I'm first getting introduced to it. I had expressed some vague interest in like trying it, and uh, I didn't have a driver's license at the time, and uh, the guys we were with are like, yeah, we want you to run a game. Like, and I'm like, well, I'd like to run this module because I didn't know how to homebrew up my own world, let alone like I barely knew how to run an actual game from a module, let alone homebrew. And uh, I got a ride from a friend all the way out to the other side of town. Uh, Picked up a book from the game store there. Picked up Out of the Abyss, and like on the 20-minute car ride back to my friend's house, I was reading and preparing to run the game that session, like run session one from the car ride. But yeah, that's like it kind of starts out as a necessity, and I feel like that's how a lot of people like start D&D's or DMing. It's like, yeah, I guess I'm doing this because I think it's fun. And nobody else really wants to. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but that's how I started, and it sort of evolved to the point where I really do I like having all of the pieces to the puzzle and trying to encourage a fun game and a fun experience for my friends. It's really rewarding when your friends are like, dang, that the next day like
Good
that was
sesh. Good sesh.
yeah, good sesh, or like, and that's like right after if they say it was fun, that's like fine and all. It's like if the next day when you see them, or they're like, dude, I want to do this and this. My character had this conversation and I really want to explore this. That's where you're like, that's where you really feel good about it, because you're like, yeah, they're thinking about this. I've made something that is worthy of their time. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, awesome.
yeah.
So now I really want to delve more into the three main pillars as I'm looking at it of storytelling, world building, and improvising in D&D. So starting off with sort of the storytelling stuff. How do you approach crafting a compelling narrative for a campaign arc? In our campaign we recently just finished our a recent campaign arc. So how do you go about crafting that one?
I don't. This might be kind of it could be hot take, but the I don't really
I'll
try and
gladly take hot takes.
yeah, I don't really plan like a story narrative. I don't want there to be like okay, I am this will be the rising action and this will be the conclusion, because I find that promotes myself. I find myself like, all right, I want, if I wrote this outcome, I want this outcome to happen, and I'm gonna kind of nudge the scales a little bit to make sure that happens. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I try my best to make a good game that's going like on a week by week basis, make something that my friends are going to be engaged in, and I find that the story kind of arises from that. Right? It's the game that we play every night turns into a story that has lasted years or months or however long you've been playing. And I think it's my role as the DM to not craft the story, but put all of the elements of a story in front of my players. And then as they, run into everything, go back through and be like, and kind of tie those threads together. Um, if that makes
Okay.
sense. If I know I'm speaking in metaphors and stuff, so if clarification's needed, I can try my best to uh,
No,
clarify.
I think I kind of get it. So you're taking the more, since D&D is a collaborative storytelling game, you're essentially just making a bunch of pieces, throwing them out there, and saying, "Have fun, and I'll make sense of it later."
Yeah, well, I would say my week by week prep and planning is I focus on the game part, right? I want
Mm-hmm.
there if there's a fun game session that we had, it will be told as a fun story. Like the fact of the matter is, like somebody rolling a nat 20 and critting against the monster and just flawlessly defeating a dragon or something like that. Or in our campaign, like I rolled really well against one of our other friends' first characters, and like even though he was playing a turtle and it was like up in his shell and it was like almost impossible to be hit, I just crit and one shot killed him in like session two. And it's like but that's something. Well, in the moment, I didn't plan for that. Um, it's part of the narrative now. It's part of the stories. Like you have this ally died tragically trying to aid your cause early on. Like, um, and then so there's that part of it. That's the week by week, and then there's also the like long term stuff, and that's more me taking little bits and pieces that between those random events that have happened, and the what players have expressed as part of their backstory and whatnot, because that's telling for what kind of game they or like what kind of arc they want, right? When you make a
Mm-hmm.
character, you're at least for me, I don't think of like, oh, what kind of what kind of stuff happened to him in the past. I'm like, all right, what kind of arc does this make for my character? What is he going to get up to? What is he going to? Is there going to be heroic rise and fall or that kind of thing? So I try and take those elements and kind of tie them into whatever we planned for that week. If I had plans there to be a dragon fight, I try my best to say, okay, maybe this was the dragon that killed your father or something like that, and that's how I can emotionally tie you into the story, and it starts to look more. You start to like weave the tapestry, if you will. So all little bits and
Okay.
pieces, and just kind of, while it might not make sense on the small scale now, as you sort of progress and move out, you'll begin to see the bigger picture.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you're essentially, as we like to call it in game, as players are making characters, their backstories creating quote unquote daggers to hand the dungeon master to play with. Say, here are a couple events from my backstory you as the dungeon master might like to play with. They're not the most interesting thing that's happened. What's going to be the most interesting thing is what we do going forward. Sort of taking an approach like that. Am I on the right track there?
Yeah. I don't. Yeah, taking those daggers and making them part of the story and making your players feel invested, because like I think DMs are like sort of in the culture, I guess. Like they're the storytellers. They're the ones telling the story. It's like yes, but also no. I'm I'm just here to facilitate this. I'm just here to wind it all together. I'm here to connect the dots. I'm I'm not really like I'm not writing a book. Writing a book and writing for D&D campaigns are very different things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would absolutely agree. So as you're working on as you're working on developing a campaign, working on I guess a week by week thing, how are you trying to push players to actively contribute to the development of the world of the story? Since I know we've had some trouble here and there in the past of certain players maybe not wanting to, or maybe not pushing as much, or not giving as much, while other players might push a lot more to have get a bit more. I don't know, maybe spotlight isn't the right word, but some players like to contribute more than others. Well, certainly that's a player preference thing. How about you? How have you tried in the past to get players more actively involved in the storytelling or creation, or is overall the D&D experience more part of it?
Yeah, I mean this is a tricky one. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I have long. This has probably been. I think for all DMs, this is something that you just are always working on. Um, it's it's never easy, but I would say finding what brings the like that person joy, like what is that person looking at, and not just like what is their character looking at it because looking for, because that's like you know that'll come with what the player wants, right? It's not the characters aren't real people. Your friends at your table are real people. So
Mm-hmm.
catering to them, and knowing who you're at the table with. That some people are very much not like mechanic oriented. Um, they just they don't play it for the crunch, and that's totally okay. Uh, but you have to now find, you can't just dangle like, ooh, here's a fancy sword that gives you +1 to hit. Like that's nice. They'll appreciate that, but that's not like going to get them out to play. Well, I definitely have people who, like especially some of my friends who are more in like the gamer crowd and play RPGs and stuff like that. They're like, you dangle like a stat bonus or something like that. They're going wild. They're like, oh, I gotta get that. I want the loot. While I feel like some of my more narrative oriented players are, you kind of gotta find what they're looking for, and then just kind of put that carrot on the stick and say, here you go, you can have this cool little scene. You gotta go work for it. You gotta go get it. And that
Mm-hmm.
tends to kind of get them to come out of their shell. um,
Yeah, could you give an example from either a recent session or one of like a either as a player or as a DM that you've had with this?
I mean, I will. We have a player in our campaign who, I don't know what her deal is. She's boy crazy, or but not. She's not like in real life. I don't think.
I don't think so either, but
But in D&D, her characters are always boy crazy, and I kind of know that if I can just dangle a, like, ooh, here's a pretty man, and I can
here's a
just,
hot slab of meat for you.
yeah, and I can weave, I can do whatever I want with that, because I kind of, I not kind of, I know what she's going to do. Like, I know where her head's going to be. I know how she's going to react, and just being able to anticipate that and like weave interesting narratives around that is probably the most fun. And I would say that this player in particular is not a super engaged player. Like, she doesn't necessarily know all the rules and whatnot. She's not necessarily always interested in role playing specific scenes and stuff. But goddamn, you put a boy or a man, or with kind of that, like, with his shirt off or something and muscular, is like, oh boy, she will like get hop into character and just throw on the acting, which, like, hey man, if that's how
Which is entertaining for the rest of us.
yeah, I'm like, if that's how we're gonna play D&D, or I guess that's how we're gonna play D&D. um and that's not to say that you just give them what they want. I This is not yet to pass, so I'm going to try and hold my tongue as much as possible to not spoil anything. But like, I'm not just giving her a man to toy around with. There's obviously, like, people have these NPCs of agency, so uh, kind of being able to like twist it and like almost trick her into like being invested in the narrative. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, this guy got captured by, oh my gosh, the bad guys that I wanted you to go after anyways. Crazy.
Mm-hmm.
You know. So
Yeah.
it's just finding, and that's a really strong example that sticks out in my head. But
Mm-hmm.
to lesser extents, all players kind of have that little kryptonite that you can exploit and use for your D&D profit.
Mm-hmm. I know how much you love loot, and I do exactly what I was doing when I put that pair of magic swords in the belly of the
Oh,
troll.
100%. Will I will push the big red button. I'm like the worst. I know. I was like, I will push the big red button like every time. It doesn't matter. I'm like, yeah, there.
Mm-hmm.
I might profit off this. Absolutely.
Wonderful. So, last thing I really wanted to go into about storytelling is when you're looking for some ideas, either for like a campaign arc or just like where to start a campaign or anything in general, when you're looking for ideas, where do you typically get inspiration?
Whatever I'm watching at the time, whatever media it happens to capture my interest. Um, like I take this is the dirty secret about DMing is like I just steal everything. I just rip it off because you're performing for your friends. You know, I'm not like writing a like I said, I'm not writing a book. I'm not writing a TV show. I'm not marketing this to anybody. So if it's like I want to have a like an adventure that is similar to what I saw in this was a while back, but like when The Witcher was kind of coming out on Netflix. Um, that was like I was like, oh, we got to do. I want to do stuff with The Witcher. I want to have a monster hunting campaign where like, the monsters are gritty and dark a little bit. That kind of. And as my interests change, I kind of will change the theme of the campaign, and um, I steal like a lot of names from media. It works really well when you know that like none of your players have seen it or watched it, but like I've recently kind of recently got really into Warhammer 40,000, and I steal names from that all the time. I steal and like concepts and whatnot. I just full like blatant rip. Like I think there was a like you guys didn't really end up interacting with them that much, but there was a captain of uh, like the army of the like empire that the civilization you guys are in, that you were interacting with the captain of the army, and his name was Sigismund, which is just straight up a Warhammer 40k like a famous space marine captain. So I was like, yeah, drag drop. He's kind of acts the same. He kind of has the same attitude and whatnot. Um, switch,
Wonderful.
which is like this is like such bad advice. I feel like bad advice if people are like, I really want to learn how to tell stories and stuff. Um, from a
Well,
DM,
I think there is good advice from this. Steal like an artist. It's plagiarism to steal from one thing, but it's artistry to steal from a lot of things and cobble it together.
yeah, and like obviously make it your own. Like, yes, I took the
Mm-hmm.
name and the demeanor of this character, but he's in a different world. He's not a space marine. He's different. Um, you just kind of and if I was worried about like the players finding out and because the thing is if your players find out, I feel like the immersion gets broken a little bit. Maybe depends on what it is, but like if you're trying to have a serious character and you're like, oh, this is you just took this story arc from. I'm going to use a really common example so people understand what I'm getting from. What's like a fairy tale? Cinderella. If you're like have a adventure and you need to like a princess runs away with and loses a glass slipper, or even like she loses a diamond clog or whatever that oh no it needs to fit the exact like people are gonna know but like hey we get this, I understand where the story's coming from, so just file off those serial numbers, make it your own, turn it into some sort of conglomerate like Frankenstein's monster of just different media and properties you like, and then it kind of like will just blend into something like really cool and unique. Like I was talking about Warhammer 40,000. Now I just blatantly ripped it off. Anybody who like is into like the lore knows that it's Warhammer is in and of itself a massive just like bunch of group of like fantasy and sci-fi tropes that have just been stapled together into a beautiful mess, and it's awesome. And people know it, and they don't care. It's awesome. Makes it's $1 million franchise now. So
Wonderful. So when you're looking for inspiration, build a horrible chimera out of the body parts of random pieces of media that you enjoy.
yeah, I mean we're in the information age now, right? You got to the stuff that
Use what you got.
yeah, the stuff that you enjoy. You want to enjoy the process of creating whatever story you're gonna tell. Use what you like. Use what brings you happiness, I would say.
Yeah, fair enough. Last thing I want to really touch on with the storytelling aspect is, are
Mm-hmm.
there any other storytelling tips you might have for aspiring dungeon masters or like tabletop players in general?
Um,
Anything you just want to shove down their throat and say, please do this thing, stop making the same mistake over and over and over again?
well, I feel like if you're making the same mistake over and over, you can acknowledge it's a mistake. Then you're a lost cause because part of DMing is I mean part of doing anything right is finding the mistake, running into different roadblocks and mistakes, and learning and growing from it. I would say recap, being able to like retell the like most recent events. This is a much more tabletop oriented thing where your players will kind of like muddle through what they want to do a lot of times because they're not actors. Um,
Mm-hmm.
if if you see Critical Role or like some of those like awesome shows on the internet where they have professional actors acting out like these immaculate scenes and whatnot, your players aren't that. Sorry, like, and that's okay. Um, but just kind of like going back and like kind of taking what they need and turning it into like what happens. Like if they go, like I go up to the guy in, and I want to tell him that he needs to take us to his leader, and otherwise I'm gonna punch him in the face. You don't go, all right, that's he looks at you funny. You say, all right, you saunter up to this man, and he gives you a look out of the corner of his eye, not recognizing recognizing you from anywhere. You issue your threat. He seems amused at first, but relents and takes you to his boss. Like if you kind of can almost the wreath. I know I keep using this thread metaphor, but if you, it works really well.
Hey,
So
keep going. Keep it going.
uh, you could if you just kind of like keep re-threading and taking what your players are saying and kind of reinterpreting it into the fiction of your story. I think it'll just make everything feel more immersive and feel more interesting, and also makes your players feel cool because they, if they just stumbled through that sentence like I did, uh, they maybe aren't like they might be feeling self conscious. They might be feeling all these different emotions, and they might just not be good at it. And kind of taking that and turning it into something cool will keep them coming back. Will keep them engaged in the game.
I
In the experience.
absolutely agree.
Yeah.
I know one of the things I try to do as both a DM and a player is I want to try to describe like everything that either one of the other players does or I do in detail to try to show like, yeah, you can describe cool things, make people feel awesome, whether they succeed overwhelmingly and you ask them to describe, like either have them describe it in depth of how do you do this absolutely amazing thing that you just pulled off, like have them try to describe it and then you can add on top of it, make it better. Or even if they horribly fail at something, ask them how do they horribly fail at this, and either way, try to make it entertaining, try to make it a something they can either laugh at or laugh with.
Yeah.
Sort of, I don't know. That's my mentality of it.
Yeah. I agree. It's all about recontextualizing what they're doing into your setting, your world. Uh, they're actors in it. You're the director. You need to direct them. they're not they're not just you. If you're like just giving them a blank stare, I mean, like, all right, yeah, you say that. He looks at you funny. Like, you gotta coordinate the scenes and help them out a little bit because they can't see this. They can't see into your mind. They might not be able to fully grasp the situation as well as you do because you made it. You put this together. you have to. It's your responsibility to really connect it all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And speaking of this being your world that you put together, I want to briefly touch a bit on world building. And one thing that I know I've fallen victim to, and I feel like most dungeon masters waste a ton of time, is on world building. What's some of the approaches you like to take towards world building, and how do you keep yourself from wasting too much time on it?
Oh my gosh, it's so hard to not like it, to not just be like in your notes or whatever, just be thinking about like, oh, what's happening in this kingdom that's like that they might not even go to, like what's going on here and yada yada yada. Well, that's fun, and I do enjoy that. If you're prepping a D&D game, uh, you need to treat that part of your world building as fun, and that's like yeah, I'm just kind of playing D&D by myself here a little bit, which sounds lonely and sad, but it's not, I promise. The that needs to be okay. This is my fun time. I'm fleshing out the lore and stuff that might not ever get touched. It might not ever get found out, but it's there, and I had fun thinking about it and exercising that thought experiment. Um, I try and build the world. This is like as they go, like putting the train tracks right in front, which is immersion breaking. Don't tell your players that you do this. This is Orion. You DM, so I'm not worried about.
We talk about this on regular occasion. It's
Yes,
fine.
so we talk about this all the time, but you don't want to let your players. Don't tell them this. Don't take the smoke and mirrors out from under them because they don't. Because as far as they know, this has always been there. It's always been like this, and keeping that illusion alive is what makes your world feel like so big. But I would just focus on what impact is going to impact next week's session. What is going to impact the game that they're playing right now? Um, what's the town that they're in? Who are the people there? What do they want? Um, what adventures can the party get involved with? Like
Mm-hmm.
what kind of hijinks can happen? Um, it, Looking at the big picture, it will come in like later. That needs to be a slow burn, especially if you're starting, right? It's like when have you ever started a game like with people you never met before or something, or maybe people you have met, and it's like, all right. So, anyways, 5 million years ago, there was a great calamity, and the gods said no, and the humans said yes, and this all stuff happened, and it, it, that's that's a boring ass game. That's a boring ass session. Like, I don't want to listen to you monologue for a while. Tell me what's cool about this town that we're in. What's cool about what we're doing right now. That I can interact with and touch. But
Mm-hmm.
metaphorically.
Yeah. So it's focusing on what matters now, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe what matters in the like near-ish future.
Yeah, yeah. That's not to say that like all of the big picture stuff isn't important because it is. But if you spend all of your time doing that, you will be getting to the next session and being like, oh, I know all about this stuff about the trade routes in my fake pretend continent that's 100 miles from where the party is. But I really don't know like what anything about the dungeon they're going into. Like, you know, it's like I don't have time to prep that, so I don't know. And
Mm-hmm.
so I just see that in myself. I get caught up in that all the time. It's just like I wanna like think about all of the machinations of my villains and that are doing stuff that is not hardly even remotely going to impact the party at this moment. Maybe it probably will later because I obviously care about it. I obviously think it's cool, so I probably will make it impact them at some point. But you know, is the god of evil going to be messing around with level 1 party members? Probably not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think you did in this past session, I think you did a great example of focusing on the here and now. Well, how do I want to phrase this properly? Uh, I think in this past session, you did a great example of pulling something from a past event and bringing it back to the here and now to say, now this thing is relevant. Because I want to say it was a few months back now, we were off doing a quest and fighting off some sky rockstar pirates. And while that was happening, the captain who had given us the job, a war had just broken out in that on that area. So as we're leaving and escaping, we just proceed to not think about that anymore. We go off, do our next quest, and now our new destination happens to be approaching that same war again. So in my mind, that was, oh, right, this world does have things going on in it that do not directly involve us, and now they're going to impact us.
Yeah, I think
I saw that as like, oh yeah, there's other things going on here. We're not the center of the world. And yeah, anyways,
yeah,
I just thought that was a really good example.
I think the best way to do the big picture stuff is literally just do like throwaway lines do throwaway lines, but make sure you write them down and excuse me, make sure you write them down and so you can come back to them later because it does feel cool when you say like you say, oh yeah, these guys leave because they need to go to war, and then you come back and like, oh, actually the war is impacting the story that I didn't think it was going to happen. um it, think of like in Star Wars in the A New Hope. I think like Obi-Wan Kenobi like mentions the Clone Wars like just offhandedly, like, oh yeah, I fought with your dad in the Clone Wars, and that like spawned a whole like 3 movies and animated TV series. So,
Mm-hmm.
and in the moment you're like, okay, cool, whatever. But it the way it ties into the great, it gives your world depth, and a sense of scale, and without ever having to like actually plan that out, mind you. Like, uh, I didn't at the time. Like, I more or less needed a reason that they couldn't go do themselves, because that's the kind of one of the problems with like a big military force. When you have like that as part of uh, your narrative, like an acting fashion, is why can't they just go deal with the problem themselves? Because they're a trained military force, and you were just a bunch of misfits with maybe magic powers, I guess. So you kind of always need to like find a way to write them out a little bit. And I was just like, yeah, there's a war going on. They need to go, and just being like kind of tying that back into the narrative later, you know, that's
Mm-hmm.
it feels very satisfying for the player. So that's
Yeah.
how I like to do the big picture stuff, is throwing stuff out there, and just making sure you remember to come back to it. Because
Mm-hmm.
write it down so you don't forget, because you will.
Yeah. And not everything you write down you have to come back to. I
Yeah,
know for the campaign that I finished, geez, how long ago was that now?
probably almost a year.
Honestly, almost a year now. Yeah, I had a lot of notes that I never even touched, that were just random ideas I had throughout the campaign that I tried to drop hints here and there of, hey, maybe you want to go play with this thing, maybe you want to go play with that
Mm-hmm.
thing. But it's like not every throwaway line that you use has to go and become a thing that you do in the game. But you can essentially have those throwaway lines or have those just random occurrences that come up and think, oh yeah, that's a good idea. I'm going to write that down for later.
Yeah, yeah, and write it down. And just because we didn't do it in that campaign doesn't mean that it's useless. There, all those notes and all those things, those are all still good. If you plan an encounter like that the players never just completely bypass, they never see, don't just crumple that paper up and throw it away. Like, that's good stuff. That you can file off them serial numbers and put it in later, or change it up a little bit and use it for a different campaign, or and do any number of things. The beauty about D&D is that everything is nebulous and kind of formless until we as the players kind of give it shape and look at it and give it like a definitive form. Um, and up until then, kind of anything goes. like you can kind of just move things around and change and swap things up, and and that way, like if you spend so much time coming up with, you do spend the time coming up with like the history and lore for these gods, and that the players just don't care, which just happens. Like you keep come up with the stuff that you think is so cool, and they just don't care. It, don't
Like, what? No one in the party is playing a cleric. No
yeah
one's a paladin.
yeah don't force it down their throat. Just be like, all right, we're not really worried about that. Kind of sideline that and keep it for a campaign where they do, or a group where somebody does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Got it.
makes sense. So, is there any other like world building tips or tricks you might like dig into? You might recommend for someone?
Just like make sure you take good notes. I this is as much advice for me as it is for anybody else. I'm horrible at taking notes. I scribble on pieces of paper that are all throughout my room. Um, but
You and your 5 to 20 notebooks and random scraps of paper lying everywhere.
yeah, I take little bits and pieces of notes, and it's the worst. Don't do that. If you take good, concise, clear notes, you'll be able to reread it and be like, "Oh yeah, I remember this thing that happened," and I can. I'm actually. I want to take that little blurb, and I'm gonna turn it into this, kind of like what we discussed earlier. Um, and it also will. You just want to know what's going on in your campaign, obviously, and having good notes is going to greatly assist because uh, it, while it's not going to be the end of the world, your friends will forgive you if you kind of stall out for a second and be like, "Oh, I really don't know." Um, it,
And they will mock you every single time lovingly.
yeah, they'll, but it kind of, it's like, if we're using the analogy of like a rail that a train that has the rails getting placed ahead of it. It's like the train got to the end of the track and now they have to wait for a little bit for the rails to go under it. Kind of breaks the flow a little bit. Not the end of the
Mm-hmm.
world, but it is a thing that kind of breaks the
It's
flow.
gonna happen. Just get used to it.
Yeah, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. Notes are good. Um, Write everything down. Uh, do stuff that you're interested in, and can you have a feel that will like hold your interest, because sometimes you will write some lore, you'll write something, and before it ever gets used, before that note ever gets touched on, it'll be like months before you actually use it. So just try and be aware of that, and either make it flexible so you will be interested about it, or you know know yourself well enough where you can be like, all right, I know this will still be cool to me in 5 months when we actually play this
Mm-hmm.
little blip.
Yeah, I cannot tell you how many times I've planned stuff out to think, yeah, we'll get through all of this in a session, and then we get through all of that over the next like 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, and like we were talking about at the start of this, is like scheduling happens too. So you're like, oh yeah, we're gonna play next week, and then we'll get to this thing, and it's like, oh, actually, we can't meet for the next 4 weeks. We need a month off because scheduling just happens,
Mm-hmm.
and so just be aware of that. Be conscious. You'll be
Yeah.
fine. People
So
people
go
love
ahead.
it. Oh, I was just saying, like, I think people get self conscious about this stuff because sometimes it's like, uh, it, it's a if you're playing for your friends, you're presenting this to your friends, like they're not going to be as critical as you think. They're not worried about this. I know from my experience of playing is like every time I've been in a D&D game, I'm just so stoked to be playing D&D. So just kind of use that knowledge of like your friends are probably just stoked to be playing D&D, and you don't need to worry so much about like having having your airtight lore, and making sure that every shopkeeper has a detailed backstory and name and stuff, and going into all that nitty gritty, because you don't need to. You'll do fine.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So finally, last real pillar I wanted to go into was improvising. Everything that happens in D&D is almost certainly going to be improvised. Well, a good portion of it is going to be improvised. So I wanted to ask you, can you think of a time where quick thinking and improvising led to a memorable or satisfying in-game moment for you, either as a player or as a dungeon master?
Improvising leading to a satisfying moment. This is a tough one because you're improvising all the time, and it's it, the way I personally prep also is mostly improv, uh, which again, don't tell your players this. The there's kind of like a split between improv and actual prep, and I lean more on like the improv side of things, because I need like the game statistics and like just some loose ideas a lot of time, and I can kind of go off that. So and just kind of work from there. I feel comfortable in that state. So I feel like almost all of our moments are improvised to some extent. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so it's hard for me to just pick one moment where I was like, yes, I completely improvise that. But I'm sure there's got to be something. I
Well,
mean,
perhaps a better question for this is because as you express, you feel a bit more comfortable being the improviser or doing that. Uh, how have you been able to like work on improving your like improvising or getting more comfortable like improvising either as a dungeon master or as a player through the years? Because I know like as we work with our players, not all of them are as comfortable with improvising or really trying to wing it per se. So how have you sort of worked on that over time?
it just comes with practice, like anything. Like I mean, it's a cop out answer, but it's the truth. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it, you just you do it enough. You have enough of those moments where you're like, oh shit, oh, sorry, I don't know if
Go
you,
for it.
I don't know if I can curse.
It's fine.
Um, the you go, oh, I didn't expect this, and you're kind of pushed out of your comfort zone, and eventually it just kind of becomes your comfort zone. It becomes your natural uh, your natural state, if you will. The I mean, like I said, I personally am almost always, to an extent, improvising. I rarely have it all planned out. I will have like for an example, like an NPC. I'll have like a name, because I can't come up with names on the fly for the life of me. Um,
Well,
it's
let's put it
just
this way. Sometimes you'll have a name, and then 50% of the time you'll say, hold up, let me open up fantasy name generator real quick.
yes, exactly. Um, I if I'm trying, if I this is an NPC that I had planned, I will have a name for
Mm-hmm.
him. Um, what they're doing, like what their goals are, that's usually about it. Maybe game statistics if they're relevant, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's I don't know. It's such a improv is such a nebulous kind of thing. For me at least. I mean, I'm not an actor. I'm not anything like that. I just like this silly game a lot. So you kind of get thrust into that position of all right, they want to go do this. They want to go talk to this silly little guy in the corner. I guess I'm gonna give him this silly little guy, silly little voice, and you just kind of go with what where the energy is, where like what people want to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's more or less you have to be willing to step into those more uncomfortable situations of I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm gonna try something and see it works or see what happens. Sort of
Yeah,
just go with the flow on that.
yeah. I mean, it's like what I said earlier about like you'll be fine. People are just stoked to play D&D. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's, if your players can tell that you're improvising, like it's you didn't plan for this. It's like yes, their immersion's a little broken, and they're oh my gosh, like I t- this you can't believe you didn't know about this, and you had to come up with this on the fly and whatnot. But at the end of the day, we all know we're playing a game, and they're going. It's going to be okay. They're gonna.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say they're going to forgive you, but like, there's nothing. They're not even going to blame you in the first place. Uh, Getting in
I
your
doubt
own.
most. Yeah, I doubt most of them are going to even think about it like 10 minutes later.
No. That,
Yeah, there's a quote that I'm reminded of where it's something along the lines of people are so busy thinking about like worrying about what others think of them to not realize that they aren't thinking about you at all.
yeah.
It's sort of that whole thing of well, you're worried about what other people are going to think of you for going out and trying this thing and possibly flopping on your face. Like whether that's in D&D or out in the real world, oftentimes people are not thinking about you and the embarrassing thing you did or the thing that you tried and failed at. They're too busy worried about what you're thinking about them. It's
Yeah. Like the best advice I can give is become comfortable with being uncomfortable, because you're just going to be uncomfortable with some situations a lot of times, and you just kind of power through it, learn how to kind of find that little pocket of what works in in this alien state that where you're not fully in control, and you'll make it through fine, and it's all good.
mm-hmm. Yeah. So finally, I have my last few bonus questions that are really centered around like being a DM as a whole, not just focused on storytelling, world building, or improvising.
Sure.
So one, what's either the best and or worst experience you've had as either a player or a dungeon master?
um Orion knows what story is coming. I had a I had a I'm not going to go into super deep detail, but I had uh, a player who wanted to fake his own death. Um, I was new at the time. I let him do it. I helped him kind of basically fake his own character's death, but then he played basically the same character, and through like some multi-classing would like was pretending to be a different character. It was convoluted. I shouldn't have. I should have just said no from the get go. Um, and he wanted it to be this big reveal, and he wanted to reveal it to one of the other players first before anybody else. And this player also happened to be his real life girlfriend. Um, I'm like, cool, like that's cool. Like, I think I'm just like, yeah, this is awesome. Like, I'm just happy to be DMing and having people who want to do cool, like, cool story reveals. And long story short, I basically take him to a different room in the house to do this, like, all right, this big reveal, but it's gotta be, I gotta be there because it's D&D. And I think I was playing a character. It was like I think it was I was playing Bahamut, which is like a dragon god. I don't remember why. That he was just there, and and the big reveal happens, and they get into what I can only describe as a lovers' quarrel, and they're arguing about stuff that like I no longer know what it's about. Like I'm like, this is not argument about D&D stuff. and I don't think I've ever been so uncomfortable and like just out of place in my life as they just like kind of begin to ignore me and just are arguing in front of me, and I'm like, cool, 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 cool. So that I have to, it just sticks out to me as like that's my D&D horror story. That's what I always tell people. There's other.
Wonderful. So, lesson learned. I don't know what the lesson learned from this is. What was the lesson learned?
I never allowed people to keep secrets from the party. They could keep secrets from like characters could keep secrets from each other, but as people, everything that happens at the table and in the game is known to everybody at the table. The only things that don't are stuff that is just for me, like villains plotting and scheming and that kind of thing. But if there's something that a
Mm-hmm.
player wants to keep secret, my rule is it has to be known to the whole table. And that maybe I'm sure that some people can make that work. Where they have a player who's keeping a secret, and I'm all the more happy for you. I just personally don't think it does, and I don't allow it at my table.
Mm-hmm. All right. And do you have any like fun, memorable, like best experiences as either a player or DM you'd want to go into to help balance out that D&D horror story?
Um, I feel like I should also have a
If
DMing one. I I I don't have a ton of really memorable DMing stories because I just get the rush every time. Like it might even just be a basic session where it's like we went shopping today, and they were talking about like the shopkeeper that they really liked the next day, and that's like that just does it. I'm like, yes, I'm the greatest D&D player alive. Um,
mm-hmm.
but my favorite one as a player was that's like a moment that sticks out to me is like the penultimate moment for one of my characters in not your one of your campaigns. It was a person in our old group, and it was my blade singer wizard Cyrus. His like sort of final confrontation with his mother, who was the villain. And all I remember was like I just got so into character that I was like, you kind of get into that full immersion state, which I don't think I've ever really had before, and I don't think I'll ever have it. I haven't had it again. It's just like a
Mm-hmm.
weird sort of thing that happened, and it was just like you kind of come out of that like, whoa, that was just really impactful. And I'm sure in retrospect, like if I could watch it on video, I would just cringe so hard. But in the moment, it was awesome.
Heck yeah. That was a really fun campaign.
Yeah, it was fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Just a few more questions I wanted to go over with you.
Sure.
As a DM, I know one thing that I know we've talked about this a bit, but how do you go about like balancing difficulty? Well, I phrased it as balancing difficulty and enjoyment as a dungeon master, but I really think it's more about like I want to focus on balancing difficulty as a dungeon
Mm-hmm.
master for your players. Like how do you look at that?
Uh, uh, I don't. I don't know. I just kind of throw stuff at him, see what happens. Like
Mm-hmm.
D and D is such a funny game because it's like they have a system for this, but like the system is
So bad.
it's flawed. It's not it's usable, but it's intrinsically flawed, and so I try and I give a smattering of different encounter types. You know um, I will purposely give like my players like uh encounters where they just absolutely don't like it's not even a challenge for them. They just roll up on some guy. Usually they're like some bandits or something who are just a bunch of like shitheads, and those guys are always like kind of just funny to beat up, and so like I will intentionally give them like wins every now and again, um, because players want to feel like cool guys, and but In terms of balancing difficulty, uh, I try and put I tend to favor encounters with more bodies on the field as I kind of progress in like my skill, I guess. Um, more bodies on the field just will make the encounter more diverse because just the action economy. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the one thing that I don't always do, and I've been trying to implement more, is giving a tertiary objective. Not even a tertiary. Sorry, tertiary is the wrong word. A secondary objective, the second one. So like or even could be a primary objective, but like something that is not just killing the bad guys. Like obviously you're fighting, you're killing bad guys, but like a hostage you need to save, a somebody you need to escape, a item that you need to retrieve from them, and adding a third element to the combat that is not just uh, bad guys, good guys. That
Mm-hmm.
kind of will take the fact of like the matter that it's like maybe this creature is much more powerful, and if he were just trying to kill you, he would be able to do so, or she would be able to absolutely mop the floor with you guys. But the fact of the matter is, not trying to kill you, it's trying to get that get this player and capture them alive, and that's a much more that is a balanced quote unquote encounter. That it will be in a much more engaging encounter. I feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. I I fully subscribe to the don't balance it. Well, I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of similar to you in this, where I don't actively try to balance
It,
the encounters.
it's an art
It's more
form and not a
about,
science, right?
yeah, yeah, it's a trial and error. You figure it out over time, kind of thing.
Yeah, you kind of just know. You know what your
Mm-hmm.
party's capable of, and you know like what some like these monsters are capable of, and you know you once you have a if you have a good feel for that, you'll be able to like make encounters that are solid and not challenging enough for what you need it to be.
Mm-hmm. All right, and one last question for you: what were some of the like skills that you found unexpectedly helpful in the world of tabletop RPGs, both in running them and in playing them?
Unexpectedly helpful. Hmm.
I think a great one would definitely be scheduling, because I know before we really dived into it, like it was not something that I ever thought about.
Yeah, it's 100% a good. It's that's a skill you will learn. You will learn how to plan your life because or people you need to be planning ahead, and you will still get like blindsided because people are busy and people like life happens. Um, the I would say a skill that I don't have, but I'm working on is like organization and like like I said earlier, keeping notes straight and keeping all of your information in a way that is easy for you to access, um, because you as a game master and a storyteller and a world builder and all of these things, you need to be able to access your own information quickly and efficiently, um, and that is a skill that I am working on, um, but you will learn. You kind of have to. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you'll just be like, "Oh my god, I died. I'm just contradicting myself left and right here. Like it's just not good."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I 100% agree. If I was not able to be as organized as I am, and I could still stand to be better with my organization, like campaigns would not flow nearly as smoothly.
Yeah, I'm just I have enough to get by.
Mm-hmm.
I am not good at it. Very self admittedly. The but I we all got stuff we need to work on, right? So
Exactly, and I'm always happy to promote working on and getting more skills. So, finally, last but not least, are there any other pieces of advice for our aspiring storytellers and dungeon masters you'd like to give? Anything at all?
uh, just that, you know, believe in yourself. You'll do fine. People get so caught up in all of the little I don't want to say stigma, but it's like that sort of like feeling of hesitation and dread that washes over you when you are so intimidated about making a fool of yourself. And it's like just make a fool of yourself. Just go for it. It's D&D is so much fun. It's honestly like it's changed my life for the better, for the most part. and and DMing is such an engaging challenge for you. It's like playing D&D is fun, but if you've never tried DMing, I highly recommend it. And just get out of your own head.
I would absolutely agree. I've enjoyed D&D so much ever since we started back in high school, and I know I've learned a lot from playing D&D that's been so useful for me outside of just the game world.
Yeah,
It's honestly kind of amazing.
yeah.
But
I feel like your skills question. I feel like I've taken more skills from D&D into the real world than I have the other way around. I mean, that's just because how much of a impact it's had on my life, how much it dominates my life.
actually, yeah, that is a good question. Then, what were some of those skills that you pulled out of D&D? It's like, wow, like I can acknowledge that being in like either being a player or being a dungeon master, this has helped me in like being a real world adult human being.
Like I was saying earlier, like about improv is being comfortable with being uncomfortable is huge because if you can, if you're not worried about making a fool of yourself in your silly fantasy role play game, uh, when it comes time to talking and engaging with people in a meaningful way, that skill transfers quite nicely. You're able to if you're able to pretend to be a suave hero, kind of channeling that energy into your real life, it helps a lot. It seems
Mm-hmm.
silly, it seems dumb, but it's like it's applicable. Um,
I would absolutely agree. Improv is probably the number one skill I've pulled out of D&D that's helped
mhm.
me so much in like my professional and educational life.
Yeah.
It's been it's been great. Well, Gabe, thanks for coming on. Uh, is there anything you want to shout out or anything you want to like promote or say, "Hey, look at this thing," or if not, that's fine. But
Um. You know
anything that you
what?
want to share?
You know what? There is a cool YouTube channel called The Lock Cafe and Games. It is for our area. It is a local coffee shop and game store that I they opened a couple months ago only. But I love everybody there. It's such a cool and great community. And they just started a YouTube channel. I believe they have D&D like let's play type stuff and Magic the Gathering content and other stuff coming down the line. And I think they're really awesome. So if you're hearing this, you should give them a check. Check them out. They're they're awesome.
Awesome. One more time. What was it called?
The Lock Cafe and Games.
The Lock Cafe and Games.
Yeah,
Well,
LOCH. Uh,
like Loch Lomond.
yeah, like Nessie.
Wonderful. Okay. As I said, once more, Gabe, thank you for coming on. And
Thank you for having me.
everyone else, I will chat with you another time. Ciao.